So we're speaking about the difference between what is called an Eved Hashem, a servant of God, and an Oved Hashem, one who is serving God. Servant of God and one who is serving God. And the difference between the two can be parallel to the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni that we've spoken about many times. The tzaddik is one who has not only full control of his animal soul, but the complete tzaddik has actually completely eradicated the animal soul from his being, and he's even transformed it from bad to good. The Beinoni is one who's constantly controlling his animal soul. The animal soul still seeps in through his thoughts, but he's able to control it. Obviously, it doesn't translate to a deed or to a word, but it does still bother him here. And that the Beinoni, the one, the in-betweener, as we also called it, is someone who's able to push off those thoughts immediately with, as the Tanya says, with two hands. Now, that parallel is the parallel of Oved Hashem, one who's still serving God, is the Beinoni, because he constantly has to engage in this fight between the godly soul and the animal soul. Yes, he's victorious each and every time, but he's still in the ring, so to speak. While the Eved Hashem, the servant of God, is one who's already conquered his animal soul completely, and therefore he's now the servant of God. He's achieved that status. Now, we spoke about that, and then we spoke about this big idea that Tanya emphasizes here in chapter 15, and that is that really in order to serve God, to truly serve God, we have to overcome that which is difficult for us. Because a person could have it in his nature to serve God. It's just natural for him, right? Remember that. But he's not really serving God because it's his nature. So he's just expressing himself, his nature. He doesn't have a real relationship. He's not doing anything that is of a sacrifice, of effort for this relationship with God. It's just, he does mitzvahs, he likes doing it. Or he learns Torah, that's just, he likes to read books. But there's no real relationship there. So the only way we can truly know if we are serving God and not just serving ourselves or our nature is if we have this challenge, if our lives require that sacrifice. And on a practical level, that's why we also suggested that people should have things mitzvahs that are difficult to achieve for them, but if they achieve them at least on a once-a-day basis, they're able to then truly be serving God and have that relationship with God. Anyway, those were the two big ideas. Let's continue here. As you said, Margot, where we left off, middle of page 51. Does anyone want to read?
I can read.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Therefore, he is in no wise called one who is serving, inasmuch as this latent love is not of his making or accomplishment by any means, but it is our inheritance that has come down from the patriarchs to the whole community of Israel, as will be discussed further. His basic feeling of connection to God by virtue of which he is a Bani, is not really his. He was born with it, he received it as an inheritance without working for it. This person, then, who turns away from evil and does only good, lives with an opportune state of affairs, a box, as it were, in which his life unfolds in proper fashion. He is a Bani and not a Sadiq, because he has no true arousal in the direction of holiness. Even more, he is not a Bani on the level of who is serving God. For him, a Bani entails no work whatsoever. It is simply the normal lifestyle for someone of his nature. Such a case of one who is not serving God may sound extreme. Not that there are not such people, but the category includes a broader population as well. So too is one who, although by nature not an assiduous student, has accustomed himself to study with great diligence, so that the habit has become second nature with him. For him, too, suffices the innate love.
Right. Just to elaborate on this, I'm reminded of the story of Rabbi Pinchas Horowitz of some 300 years ago, who became known also as the Baal HaHafla'ah, wrote a book, Hafla'ah, which is truly a tremendous book on both Jewish law and Jewish thought. But At first, he wasn't among the Hasidic Jews. He was more among the you know people who opposed the Hasidic Jews at the very onset of Hasidism. And but he was curious, so he went to explore what Hasidism is about. And he traveled to Mezrich to meet with the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the predominant student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. And when he was there for Shabbat, and he wasn't too impressed, he said, "Okay, I guess I'm not going to become a Hasidic Jew like every 1 year." And on at the end of Shabbat, he goes to the Maggid of Mezrich to say goodbye and to part ways. And the Maggid of Mezrich, the Maggid of Mezrich told him, "Before you go, you should go and see my student Reb Zusha, famous Reb Zusha who we've spoken about in the past." And Pinchas Horowitz says, "Fine." So he goes and sees Reb Zusha, and Reb Zusha says to him, "Rabbi Pinchas, I have a question for you. In the Talmud, it says that there are 9 people that are gathered for a minyan. Then can they include as the number 10 the ark that had its own tablets inside, the ark of the Holy of Holies of the Holy Temple? Can that become the number 10?" And the Talmud says, no, it can't, because at the end of the day, it's not a human being, it's a piece of wood, plated by gold, but it's a piece of wood. So Rab Zusha says to Rabbi Pinchas, which is very harsh, but in many ways, that's what convinced Rabbi Pinchas to stay and to become really one of the greatest Hasidic Jews of his time and maybe of all times. But Rab Zusha says, what is the Talmud thinking? Obviously, the ark is a piece of wood. So why is it even thinking that it can complete a minyan? It's not a human being. And Rab Pinchas says, you're right. It's a good question. What's your answer? And Rab Zusha says, well, my answer is that you can have a lot of Torah in you. You can even be considered holy. But at the end of the day, you're just a piece of wood. There are people like that. And Rab Pinchas got the message. He says, okay, I have a lot of Torah, but just a piece of wood. So that's what made the difference for him. And again, he stayed, he became a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, and really a great scholar, a great chassid. But what Reb Zusha was saying in a very harsh way, but in a very truthful way, that some people can have a lot of Torah, it's nature by them. They can have a lot of Torah, they can have a lot of holiness, but at the end of the day, there's no fundamental change in them. There's no fundamental growth in them. They're just a piece of wood. And really to transform ourselves, to have that veritable relationship where I and God become one, so to speak, I have to overcome myself. I have to surpass myself, my nature. And this is what this is saying. You can be a great Torah studier, right? Was accustomed himself to study with great diligence. But at the end of the day, you're just a piece of wood. I remember that Rabbi Steinsaltz once told me that his teacher, Rabbi Shlomo Chaim Kesselman, once came to, I don't remember where it was, but he once came to a place and he met an old friend of his that he hadn't met in a long time. And both were very pious Jews, very Hasidic Jews too. So Rabbi Steinsaltz tells me, I asked Rabbi Shlomo Chaim, my teacher, how was that meeting with his old friend? And I think it was Rabbi Nissan Nemanov, who was also a great Hasidic Jew. And Rabbi Steinsaltz then tells me Rabbi Shlomo Chaim came back and he said that Rabbi Nissan Nemanov was very upset because when Rabbi Shlomo Chaim asked him, how are you? Rabbi Nissan Nemanov said, I just have become a Jew of the code of Jewish law, of the Shulchan Aruch. And he was bemoaning that fact. And what he meant was that you can do every law in the code of Jewish law, you can follow every letter. But if you don't have that fire, if you don't have that ability to really transport yourself higher and transcend yourself, then you're just a Jew of the code of Jewish law. You're just a piece of wood. This is really what this is saying. We have to relationships demand or require transcendence. And if they don't have transcendence, they're not relationships. And the transcendence is achieved specifically through overcoming our own nature, as the Tanya says so. Please share your comments, but and again, this shouldn't be just a monologue, so feel free to disagree also, add anything. But otherwise, we can continue. Just on a deeper level, since we just came from Passover, you know, according to Kabbalah, this is also why God needed to take us through the sea in order for us to finally deserve the Torah on Mount Sinai. So we came out of Egypt. But as they say, you can take the Jew out of Egypt, but you can't take the Egypt out of the Jew. So God needed to do something that was transcendent for the Jewish people. And he took them through the sea. Once they took them through the sea, then they had a relationship. Then they deserved the Torah. What is it about the splitting of the Red Sea that caused them to deserve the receiving of the Torah? Many ways, it's something much deeper. It's not just the splitting of a physical sea, but every year when we come out of Egypt on the first night of Passover, we may have come out of our own physical Egypt, but Egypt may have not come out of us. So what we need to do to truly achieve freedom and to truly establish this relationship with God is that we have to split our own sea. We have to break that nature. That's what this represents. We have to force ourselves to dig deep, 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 deep to find treasures that we didn't even know existed, just like it is when you split a sea. And once you go deep and you connect to that soul and you transcend your nature, then God says, oh, now we have a relationship. Now I can come and give you the Torah. So that's really what it's about. Otherwise, you can take a Jew out of Egypt, but he's still a slave, not physically, but mentally, spiritually. And Beinonis can be slaves. I mean, so-called Beinonis, not real Beinonis, because for them, Torah study is natural. Not doing sins is natural. Mitzvahs is natural. But if they ever split their own sea, no, they're just a piece of wood, piece of flesh. And to truly have this relationship where God says, okay, you've made that transcendent step. Now I can come and give you the Torah. Now we can have a relation. Now we can get married, which is what the Torah, the giving of the Torah is about. Then we need to split our own seas. So that's what it's about. Since we just came from there, it's important to connect it. Okay, let's continue. But again, feel free to share any thought, any.
Actually, Rabbi, I do have one
Yes,
thought.
yes, please.
I watched the interview with Sapir and Sasha.
Yeah,
And Sapir, I mean, she's really good with her words.
yeah,
But she said something. She said that after she came out of the tunnels, that she had a hard time going back to dressing the same way she used to, and even seeing some of her old friends because she had changed so much for
mm,
her.
yeah,
And when she said that, and that she said that she had grown so much and that she didn't want to really go back to who she was. And I thought that was really beautiful, but it reminded me of like her journey and how she changed and what you said with like, you know, getting out of Egypt.
right, right. No, it's very powerful. Yeah, she did. I remember her telling me that. And she was captive in Gaza for just 55 days. I actually asked Sasha if he feels the same way. Because Sasha was captive in Gaza 498 days and it's just released, what, 2 months ago. Um, and Sasha says that he, so that's funny. I've become very close with them. So I feel like, I can ask these questions. And Sasha says, yeah, he says it depends which friends. Some friends I really miss. Some friends I've realized were not my friends while I was in Gaza. And um, he says, but they still want a piece of me. Every single one of them wants a piece of me now. So I'm trying to sift through those friendships. But in many ways, it's true because, when you go through challenges, and you transcend yourself, it's the paradox of life in many ways, because when you transcend yourself, that's when you become your true self. And when you become your true self, you realize, oh, that true self really is doesn't belong here and doesn't belong there. It belongs somewhere much higher, much deeper.
Crossing the Red Sea was
Yes,
not the end.
was
Was
not
not
what?
the end. You still had to cross
Yeah,
deserts and you still had to cross mountains.
that's right.
You still had challenges of faith all along the way. So it wasn't the end, it was the beginning.
That's right. Absolutely. And they remained slaves in many ways. We saw that when the spies came back from Israel and they weren't ready to move. They weren't ready to make that step. But it was at least the first step, the first defining step forward. Um, and that, by the way, it's a good point, William, because we can have transcendent steps, but if we don't make them consistent, then we can very easily retort to our old self.
Mhm.
So that effort needs to continue, just like in every relationship. We're very good, and I see that all the time in dating. In the dating stage, we can transcend ourselves no problem because we're just madly infatuated with the person that we fell in love with. It's not love, it's maybe more lust than love. But so we transcend ourselves, we make all sorts of efforts and compromises, even. But then people stop that effort for some reason a week, a month, a year, 2 years into their marriage. But if you want to have a veritable relationship, that transcendence needs to reoccur consistently. And eventually, it changes you to the point that I think the ultimate relationship is where you are the other person and the other person is you. Just like the Talmud says, "Ishto kegufo," because you've come out of that shell of that old self. But like you said, William, it's not just one splitting of the Red Sea. It's time and time again, valleys and mountains and deserts and all sorts of other tests that God gave the Jewish people, from the spies to even what we are celebrating during these very days. That's why we had a kichala. Custom was to have a kichala, Spar Shabbat. But that's when the manna fell. The Jewish people also were given that test. You don't have food now. Let's see how you react. You're going to go back to your old self and start complaining and not have faith? Or you're going to say, okay, no, the God that took us out of Egypt will give us bread. So many, many tests. You're right. But that's the purpose is again to transform us, to create that real relationship with God. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see.
Someone who is
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, please. Yeah. Andrea, go for it.
Someone who is not a bookworm by nature, but who applies himself diligently over the course of years, can reach a point in his inner struggle where his inner struggles subside and his persistence becomes habitual. After years of regular study and prayer, his efforts are not conditional on his striving and desire. They have already become ingrained. His studies do not stem from love of God or from an appreciation of their importance. Rather, they have become a fixture of his life. The principle is universal. When anyone enters a new field of endeavor in his youth with enthusiasm, his newfound habits can rewrite the basis of his entire life. He may not be able to turn himself completely inside out enough, but at least no longer require an inner battle to act effectively. As for being a Bayani, to turn away from evil and do good, his hidden love of God suffices.
Right. And I would say that this also applies to every area of life, not just to the inner area of life, of how we have to work on ourselves constantly, whether we're 15 years old or 95 years old. But I think it applies to our mission too, to our purpose in life. That once Rabbi Steinsaltz would very often quote this became almost a slogan of his, that every living thing must grow. If you're alive, you have to grow. A tree that doesn't grow is dead. So if you're alive, you have to grow. And that's why, him, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and so many others were very much against retirement. There is no word for retirement in Hebrew, as Jordan and I just spoke about. Um, It doesn't mean that you can't retire officially from your work, but it does mean that you can't stop exercising your talents and skills. So if God gave them to you, it means that they're part of your purpose. It means that God wants you to benefit the world with them. So you can channel them in different directions, but you can't retire them completely. It's an ongoing work, and that's why it really says that tzaddikim, people truly righteous, אין להם מנוחה לא בעולם הזה ולא בעולם הבא, that they have no rest, not in this world and not in the world to come, because they are cognizant of this, that it's not just the inner transformation, but it's also the outer transformation that they were tasked to orchestrate with their skills, with their talents. So it's it could be very deflating because it means that we have to work our whole lives. But on the other hand, there's nothing more rewarding and nothing more divine than being in that journey, because then you truly have a relationship with God. You're not alone in that journey. You're with God. God is with you. Anyway, that's that. But every living thing must grow. And if you're not growing, you're not living. It's a very harsh statement, but that's the truth. Now, there's different types of growth, right? There's the winter growth, where you're conserving energy and you're growing internally. Maybe not, the tree's not blossoming from the outside, but it is within blossoming. So, but still, every living thing must grow. Okay, let's continue. Just maybe one more paragraph here. And again, I welcome your comments, disagreements, ideas, and so on. Okay.
In
Now,
other words,
yeah.
even if one has slain dragons, waged wars, and overcome obstacles, someone with real achievements to his credit, none of this means that he has reached the level of one who is serving God. We see situations in the physical world too, in which there can be an equilibrium, a balance, or one particular level, and the effort to reach equilibrium on the next level may require a great deal of energy. Yet after that new balance is achieved, there is no essential change. When a stone rests on the ground, nothing is required to keep it there. To lift it to the roof takes a good deal of effort, but when it is already there, no further exertion is needed, as it is comfortable there as it was on the ground. Its new location is unnatural, getting there took much effort, and the new stone's placement presumably offers some advantage to those who brought it. But the stone itself is unchanged, as stable and motionless as formerly. So too it matters of the spirit. Whenever the dynamics of the soul are not diligently applied, one is liable to reach a stasis, a level plane, without progressing further. And when this happens, the person slides back to where he was before. The instant something becomes second nature, we have as though it were first nature.
Right. I think this is a very powerful concept. In the words of the Talmud, I think that in of itself is just powerful. But Talmud sees everything, including human beings, as things that have two dimensions. Just want to let you into a Talmudic concept that is prevalent and is very powerful. And those two dimensions that everything has, including human beings, is called Chefza and Gavra. If anyone is familiar with it, Chefza and Gavra. Chefza means chefetz, which means the object itself, and Gavra is the subject. Subject and object. Every dimension is a subject. The structure and the content. The external and the internal. Okay? Everything in the world has that, including human beings. And what this is saying is that a person can change externally. You can have a promotion at work. You can get a new job status. You can have a higher rank in your social status. But that's just the change of the chefza, of the object. What about the subject, the internal person? And very often, there's a complete disbalance between the chefza that does keep growing, like the stone that goes from one roof to a higher roof, but the gavra, the subject himself, is not changing. And I remember asking a prominent persona in this, in America, when she was thinking to run for president, Marianne Williamson, who's Jewish, by the way, and has many authors. I asked her, what is the greatest crisis in America? If you're running for president, you have to know. And she said the greatest crisis is that you have millions and millions of children in adult bodies. Anyways, this is what this is speaking about. So the bodies are growing, the chefza is growing, the promotions are growing. Great. What about the stone itself? Could be on the highest roof, but the stone is a stone. What about the gavra subject? And that's a question we have to ask ourselves all the time. So I can't be convinced that if I'm growing outwardly, it means I'm growing inwardly. No. You have two dimensions, and we have to work on both. And that's what a true Oved Hashem is, servant of Hashem is, someone who consistently and constantly works on his gavra, not just on his chefza, on his internal, not just on his external. The stone itself is transformed.